Urgent, a Japanese hammer over Moscow, Tokyo joins the fight for Ukraine. Under the label of top secret, Ukraine has been given what will turn the Russian army into ashes. The alliance of Kiev and Tokyo has erased Putin's plans. Great Britain has begun the maritime execution of Putin's ships, while Moscow tried to snap back. Keir Starmer gave the order for a total cleanup. Europe has changed its tone. British forces have squeezed the Kremlin in a deadly vice. Shock! Turkey has done it, the nullification of the Kremlin. Erdogan and Zelensky have shaken hands on it. The Kremlin's walls are crumbling, a crushing blow from which there is no escape. And also Armenia is burying the CSTO, a dressing down of Putin on live television. Pashinyan slammed the door loudly, right in Putin's face. Belarus is going on the attack, but who is the target? Batka is playing a deadly double game. In whose direction are the Belarusian tanks actually aimed? All of this is coming up in our program, Hotspot. At this very moment, a Japanese fist of death hangs over the Kremlin. This is what everyone in Moscow feared. Japan has struck right at the heart of Russia. Japanese technologies of the future are already being integrated into Ukrainian destruction systems. What exactly did the Japanese give Ukraine under the top secret label? Watch.
Russia has officially protested to Japan and summoned the Japanese ambassador to Moscow. The reason was the new cooperation between Tokyo and Kiev in the field of drone technology. The Russian Foreign Ministry accused Japan of hostile actions and supporting Ukraine in the war. This refers to an agreement between the Japanese company Terra Drone and the Ukrainian manufacturer Amazing Drones LLC, which became known in March. The Japanese side is investing in the Ukrainian company, which specializes in the development of interceptor drones. The main task is to fight reconnaissance and strike drones, including the drones mass-produced by Russia, such as the Iranian Shaheds.
Shooting down missiles with missiles might be okay, but shooting down a Shahed that costs $30,000 with a missile that costs more than $500,000 is economically irrational, and it's no longer acceptable, and people are starting to understand this. Therefore, the demand is extremely high.
At the same time, Japan's participation in such a project is of particular importance. Since World War II, the country has adhered to a pacifist policy and for a long time avoided participation in military conflicts abroad. However, since the start of the full-scale war in Ukraine, Tokyo has been gradually reconsidering its role. Japan has already provided Ukraine with billions of dollars in aid, from humanitarian support to the restoration of infrastructure and energy.
Japan considers the occupied territories to be occupied and refuses to sign a peace treaty with Russia. Because they should return Sakhalin, they should return the Kuril Islands. Therefore, it can logically help any country in the world that is at war with Russia help with anything, and launch missiles itself however it wants.
In addition, the Land of the Rising Sun has joined the sanctions against Russia and has repeatedly declared its support for the territorial integrity of Ukraine. Now, cooperation is also reaching a technological level, albeit through private companies. At the same time, Tokyo's political position remains consistent. In February 2026, Japan's foreign minister confirmed the country remains on Ukraine's side, and this position is unchanged, which Russia obviously doesn't support.
Well, they've been throwing a fit since this morning. At Japan, because Japan has invested a bit of intellect and money into the production of Ukrainian drones. A little bit. Just a bit, they're interested, maybe even more for themselves. But they helped us a little. That's it, now there's hysteria that Japan, the samurai, are practically participating in the war on Ukraine's side.
Even earlier, in January 2024, Japan's Foreign Minister Yoko Kamikawa visited Kyiv on an official visit, where she declared readiness to strengthen support and participate in international security initiatives, including nuclear safety issues. In Moscow, this is seen as another step toward deepening Japan's involvement in the war. It's also clear there's panic in Russia over the cooperation between Ukraine and Japan in the field of drones. It was called a threat to their own security. And Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova characterized this partnership as an openly hostile step. The Kremlin cynically stated that Ukrainian drone developments are allegedly legitimate military targets.
The secret invasion has begun. Russia and NATO are already at war. Britain has declared a hunt for Moscow. Prime Minister Starmer launched a top-secret operation that made the world give a standing ovation. London has officially cut off Putin's oxygen. The time for warnings has run out. What to expect next? Watch. Britain has exposed a secret Kremlin operation.
To President Putin, I say, we see you.
Russia was conducting a secret operation involving submarines in British waters.
Healy responded to the Kremlin and Putin. We will not take our eyes off them. Putin would like us to be distracted by the Middle East. But Russia is the main threat to the United Kingdom and its allies.
The British Armed Forces monitored 3 Russian submarines in the North Atlantic around the clock for over a month. This is no longer a routine patrol, but an attempt to probe the West's vulnerabilities.
The defense secretary exposed and brought into the public domain a Russian operation that neither side had commented on before. A kind of underwater standoff is taking place between the two countries, which usually remains out of the public eye. It's interesting that he's raising this issue for a number of reasons. He calls it, I think, a show of strength in terms of British and Allied capabilities. The Royal Navy worked with the Norwegians using Royal Air Force reconnaissance planes to track 3 submarines.
As Defense Secretary John Healey said, this group included a Project 971 Stuka B nuclear submarine, as well as 2 specialized boats from the main Directorate of Deep Sea Research. The Stuka B could have played the role of a decoy to draw attention to itself, while at the same time the submarines were working right over critical infrastructure.
An Akula-class attack submarine and 2 Guji reconnaissance submarines have recently departed from British waters and are now heading back north.
After reconnaissance vessels spent a significant amount of time thoroughly surveying and monitoring areas over critical infrastructure that is relevant to both use and our allies,
the Russian Federation's underwater operation in the Atlantic has failed miserably. The British fleet chased away Russian submarines that were engaged in espionage.
in that case, the British side can also respond with similar actions.
Healey did not disclose what specifically the Russian submarines were trying to do. But from the defense minister's words, it became clear that the target of the operation was underwater communications.
There is no evidence that any damage was caused.
A significant portion of the gas used to heat Great Britain flows through pipelines laid underwater.
Our armed forces are among the best in the world, and the British public should not doubt that this government will do everything necessary to protect our national and economic security, wherever in the world it may be required.
Along the coastline of Great Britain, especially in East Anglia and the southwest of the country, about 60 underwater cables are laid, coming ashore at several points. Up to 99% of international internet and telecom traffic passes through them, which is the basis of global banking, trade and communications.
We will not shy away from action and exposing Russia's destabilizing activities aimed at testing our resolve.
The struggle has long gone beyond land and air, and Russia wants to undermine the stability of other countries.
Great Britain is stepping up its defense efforts, spending an additional £100 million on aircraft to search for submarines, and launching the Atlantic Bastion program to create British hybrid naval forces.
Addressing Putin directly, Healey stated,
"We see you, we see your activity over our cables and pipelines, and you should know that any attempt to damage them will not be tolerated and will have serious consequences."
According to the Russian embassy in London, the Russian propaganda agency TASS denied Healey's statement. The UK government recalled that this is not the first such activity by the Kremlin. Last year, the reconnaissance vessel Yantar was recorded in British waters. And over the last 2 years, the number of Russian ships posing a threat to British waters has increased.
Yantar is one of the key vessels used by Russia to threaten Great Britain and our allies. Over the last 2 years, the number of Russian vessels threatening British waters has increased by 30%.
Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha reacted to the UK's counter-operation.
We highly value the vigilance and resolve of our British partners. Exposing Russia's malicious actions is one of the most effective methods of countering them. We urge the international community to abandon any wishful thinking about Moscow. This regime must be contained, isolated, and sanctioned without mercy to keep its aggressive ambitions at bay.
This year, the United Kingdom has stepped up water patrols to deter Russian aggression and protect underwater infrastructure. And it continues to closely monitor the situation, working with allies to track and prevent any activity that threatens British interests.
It's happened. Ankara is officially joining the fight for Ukraine, a Turkish scimitar in Putin's back. Zelensky and Erdogan have struck a deal, leaving the Kremlin looking like fools. The final chord for the occupiers. While Moscow pinned its hopes on friend Recep, Ankara deals a crushing blow that's shaken the Kremlin's walls. Watch for all the details.
Zelensky is back in Turkey. However, this time it wasn't just about peace negotiations. Now Ukraine is a full-fledged ally and security partner. On his Facebook, the Ukrainian leader stated that the relevant state-level decisions have already been made.
In 2022, everyone was talking about the Turkish Bayraktar. They even built a plant here in Ukraine, and we sort of took their drone technology. Now the Turks will be taking ours. 4 years have passed, and in that sense, a lot has changed.
Analysts say it's important not just to sell your products, but to secure long-term contracts. And with Turkey, it's vital to build the relationship wisely so that partnership doesn't turn into competition.
Both Ukraine and Turkey produce drones. This means that, well, sort of, we need to work together and coordinate very carefully so that these drone deliveries to the Middle East do not negatively affect the partner. I'm speaking from the Ukrainian side as well. But Ukraine has extensive combat experience. That's a bit different because just producing a drone isn't always quite enough to defend against one.
At the same time, perhaps the main thing Ukraine can offer is not just the drones themselves, but the experience of fighting drones and missiles in cheaper ways than NATO is used to. This is, so to speak, a turnkey air defense model in which Ankara, having already fended off Iranian missiles 3 times, is extremely interested today.
This includes tactics, electronic warfare systems, detection and anti-aircraft systems, meaning how to shoot them down, and general organization of modern combat, how to behave in the kill zone. How it's possible with relatively small forces and fairly inexpensive and accessible equipment to fight the traditional weaponry of a well-trained army, including helicopters, tanks, and so on, which are actually neutralized quite well by drones that are an order of magnitude cheaper.
The president's meeting also touched upon negotiations. Zelensky and Erdogan confirmed that Istanbul could become a new venue for a trilateral meeting in the Ukraine, USA, Russia format.
Negotiations in Turkey took place back in 2022, as we recall, and in 2025 they began in the summer, specifically in Turkey. Moreover, Turkey, unlike the United Arab Emirates, took a more active part there. The foreign minister was essentially the moderator of the negotiations.
It's worth noting that earlier, NSDC Secretary Rustem Umerov traveled to Turkey for a visit. There, he held a meeting with the Turkish Defense Minister Yaşar Güler. They discussed developments in humanitarian and defense cooperation between Kyiv and Ankara. However, analysts believe they discussed more than just that.
I am deeply convinced that there are so-called facade topics, right, which he discusses in Turkey at his level, at the level of the foreign minister, and at the level of the defense minister. This includes Turkey as a negotiation platform, and it also includes the exchange of prisoners. But I am deeply convinced that there are also topics that do not make it into official media reports.
Among such topics, for example, experts cite Ukraine's overall role in the Middle East. After all, once the war in Iran ends, much will change, particularly regarding trade, defense, maritime shipping, and more. This is where Kyiv gets a chance to become a full-fledged player in the region, and it's better to discuss this in advance.
The president's visit to Turkey isn't just about, talks on peace mediation, military cooperation, or economic relations. During this visit, I'm certain the Iranian war and the shifting balance of power in the Near and Middle East were discussed. Ukraine is a key player on the Asian map. This is a moment that, in principle, finally allows us to speak not just of international agency, but of a certain soft power that Ukraine possesses.
In exchange, even today, Ukraine gains a reliable partnership with Turkey, which has once again confirmed it does not dispute our territorial integrity and, given recent meetings, will clearly act more actively as a peacemaker.
And right then, Pashinyan arrived to finish off Putin, a blow from which the dictator will not recover. Armenia is publicly burying the CSTO. Yerevan is leaving, slamming the door as former allies turn away from Putin. Watch for all the details. 2 friends met in the Kremlin, or rather 2 former friends. Pashinyan came to Moscow to resolve important issues and even managed to troll Putin a bit.
I think the main interested party here is, of course, the Kremlin. Why? Because basically he can't refuse. It's also clear that Armenia is geographically situated such that it certainly needs good relations with Russia. Another thing is that the Armenian-Azerbaijani war and Russia's non-intervention in this story showed that today Putin is capable of nothing, and as an ally, he is absolutely useless.
Of course, at the center of attention are the upcoming parliamentary elections in Armenia, which are of no small interest to the Russian dictator.
There are many political forces that are pro-Russian, Of course, I'll tell you honestly and quite frankly, we really wanted all these political parties and politicians to actually be able to take part in this internal political work during the elections.
Is Putin really harboring his last hopes of gaining control over the country?
Putin is trying his best to influence all the elections he can influence, and he influences them in well-known ways.
But even in this case, Pashinyan gave a tough response to the dictator and destroyed his pipe dreams.
He says it's not simply that Armenian passports are required here. No, he's expressing it in a more subtle way. What he really means is that you are pushing people who hold Russian passports onto us, and that only those individuals who possess single citizenship are eligible to be elected here. And goodbye.
Although, of course, strangely enough, any interference in Armenia's elections is denied in the Kremlin itself.
Look, European representatives, they see Moscow's interference in everything. Everywhere and in everything.
And what would it be without discussing enemies? Putin is effectively warning the course towards the EU could cost Yerevan too much, from cheap gas to political pressure.
We understand that any country strives to achieve maximum benefits from cooperation with third countries. But it must be absolutely obvious, and it must also be fair, clearly stated in advance, as they say, right at the outset. Being in a customs union with the European Union and with the EAEU is simply impossible. It's simply impossible.
But it seems that's when the Prime Minister pushed back against Putin and within the Kremlin walls told him where to go.
As long as there is an opportunity to combine these agendas, we will combine them. And when the process is developed to the point where it will be necessary to make some kind of decision, I am sure that the citizens of the Republic of Armenia will make that decision.
It seems Putin is losing an ally and a member of his Eurasian Economic Union who doesn't even deny that he might change course towards Western countries.
What's the point of an alliance with Putin anyway? The only thing Putin says directly is that we have lower gas prices. But Pashinyan keeps thinking tomorrow they'll bomb everything and you won't have any gas left and so on. It's clear that from a strategic perspective, getting closer to the European Union is much more interesting.
Freedom, independence, and democracy are words that make Putin's eyes pop out. But against the backdrop of constant internet outages in Russia, this is all for your safety. You should switch to Max and vKontakte. To hell with you and your Max and your vKontakte. Pashinyan decided to boldly taunt the Kremlin master with words that trigger him and reminded him of the joys of Putinism.
There are citizens who think that there is an excessive amount of democracy in Armenia. But for us, as we see it, this is a matter of principle. Our social networks, for example, are 100% free. There are absolutely no restrictions.
The final rift between the countries occurred in 2022, when hostilities broke out on the border of Armenia and Azerbaijan. Moreover, the clashes were already taking place on the territory of Armenia itself. However, the Collective Security Treaty Organization, which includes the Russian Federation, never intervened.
We are not participating in the work of the CSTO at the present time for a very simple reason. At this point, we are still unable to clearly explain to our people, to our citizens, why the CSTO failed to react and did not respond.
Meanwhile, rallies against the Prime Minister were held in the center of Moscow. Could it be a performance?
He promised the people peace.
Such bold answers from the Armenian Prime Minister suggest that the country no longer needs Russia's help or Putin's questionable support.
Putin spends so much of his energy and focus on the war with Ukraine that he simply has no strength left for anything else. So, when those who used to be his allies, his partners, or whatever you want to call them, have problems or run into trouble, Putin just can't help anyone at all. And that is exactly why so many allies are gradually falling away, each with their own varying degrees of activity.
And the most surprising thing is that we are seeing this dialogue. The Kremlin actually brought into the public sphere a conversation that hardly adds points to Putin. Is it really that bad with allies that even such moments are being broadcast? And it seems the circle of friends around him is getting narrower. Shock! Belarus is going on the attack. Putin officially forced Lukashenko to pull the trigger. A new war is already on the doorstep. But the dictator in Minsk is playing a double game. Which way are the Belarusian tanks really pointed? A familiar scenario is already on the table. Will this shot be a suicide for the Lukashenko regime? More on this next. Putin's regime is preparing a new bridgehead for strikes against Ukraine. This time from the territory of Belarus.
There can be no peacetime, Pavel. We are preparing for war.
Moscow plans to deploy bases for long-range drones in Belarus, a move that could sharply reduce the reaction time of Ukrainian air defense and shift the balance of threats.
Belarus has never been as ready for war as it is ready today. In all 31 years of Lukashenko being in power, he has never invested so much in the development of the military sphere in Belarus.
And the numbers speak for themselves. In the last week alone, the Russian Federation launched about 400 long-range drones and dozens of missiles at Ukraine. The main blow fell on civilian infrastructure. There are dead and dozens of wounded.
Putin's occupation army is unable to undertake any offensive actions. That's not happening. And Putin's army has no potential for offensive actions. And Putin and his command have completely switched to strikes on peaceful Ukrainian cities.
And this is just part of a broader strategy. After the massive attack on March 24th, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky confirmed Muscovy is preparing for a new phase of escalation.
We have clear information that Russia plans further deployment of ground control stations for long-range drones, both in the temporarily occupied territory of Ukraine and 4 stations in Belarus. We will respond accordingly.
If before Belarus was used as a convenient corridor for war, now the masks are off. Minsk is being drawn deeper into the conflict, turning from a transit territory into a full-fledged Russian bridgehead for strikes against Ukraine. Since 2022, troops have entered from here, missiles have flown, and the offensive on Kiev began. And apparently the mustachioed dictator is ready to openly put Belarus under direct fire. For Ukraine, these are new risks. The key factor here is distance. The shortest distance from Kyiv to the border with Russia is 200 to 250 kilometers. This is time that works for Ukrainian air defense. But if launch positions appear in Belarus, the distance will shrink to about 100 kilometers. And that means less time for detection, less time for reaction, and a much higher risk of breaking through air defenses. And in such a configuration, not only Ukraine is under attack. The risks are rapidly approaching the borders of NATO.
Russia is a broken civil society that is simply geared only for war and only with war. Can Russia and its leadership successfully exist? We can, of course, talk about war, but naturally all experts are of the same opinion. Russia will be absolutely and completely incapable, as well as totally unable, to wage or carry out any kind of significant or meaningful war or military conflict against the United European forces.
The only thing that Putin is capable of today is destabilization. But even those are already becoming difficult. In parallel, against the backdrop of failures at the front, the Kremlin is betting on what it does best: intimidation. And Belarus becomes a key instrument in this strategy. A platform from which pressure can be increased and the threat zone expanded. Sensation. Collaborator Pavel Gubarev broke his silence and delivered a sensation that made the bunker walls shake. Russia is being ruled from Britain. Putin is just a puppet on the West strings. Gubarev voiced figures that propaganda hides under a top-secret label. But that's not all. Watch for all the shocking details.
Collaborator and so-called former People's Governor of Novorossiya, Pavel Gubarev, has made contact. A staunch supporter of the Russian world ideas gave a 4-hour interview to Yuri Dud in which he said enough for more than one prison term.
I'm in Russia. I'm afraid of falling under fake news laws, especially since I have a court case. There's already an administrative one of an administrative nature. So I'll express myself carefully and maybe I'll even joke my way out of it somewhere.
However, Gubarev didn't stay cautious for long. And right from the start of the interview, he began to lay out the hard truth, unpleasant for the Kremlin.
Russians have Sochi, they have Crimea. Well, these are like small little strips of land. We don't have much of the south. Well, and yet, southern spaces, they are the most favorable for living. Therefore, Russians need to strive for the south.
Except that Putin's move to seize new territories has become a thorn in the Kremlin's side.
This blood, it's being shed in vain. Well, there's no goal at all. Well, we don't have. We are clearing, well, the land where Slavs lived. Who are we clearing it for? For whom? For what? I mean, everyone has enough of everything, right?
Enough, but not quite, the collaborator admits. That's why the Kremlin has no intention of stopping.
You're brothers, you're a brotherly nation. And that's a strong position. Yeah, well, we killed you a little bit, but you killed us too. But we say, we're a brotherly nation, we're one people. They say, no, we're not one people, you're not our brothers.
Which means Gubarev reasons a few more cities must be wiped off the face of the earth.
We didn't destroy those cities because we wanted to. It's also a kind of sacrifice where we are the instrument.
The former people's governor of Novorossiya doesn't even hide all the atrocities that are being committed by the Russian army and collaborators just like him.
We'll have to suffer a lot too and like shed some blood.
Then Gubarev goes even further. Completely forgetting all safety measures, he deviates from the Kremlin's scripts and starts attacking the Russian authorities themselves.
Well, if Ukraine has some kind of goal and Ukraine's truth is, we were attacked, we'll take back our territories, you could say there's some truth there, but for us, the goal of the SVO still hasn't been announced. What we want, what we're doing, what it's all for, and what the ultimate goal is, where the war ends, where we've won, it hasn't been voiced.
Gubarev assigns the man in the bunker the role of a puppet in the hands of an invisible secret government. And that's understandable, because criticizing what's happening this way is much more convenient and safer.
Putin is something else. I mean, Putin is either a label on this entire structure called Russia, as some people might say, or it's a program or some kind of system program, or maybe it's some kind of relic.
But apparently, judging by everything, even the most ardent Z-patriots no longer believe in this relic.
People are a bit tired, both on that side and on this one. And that's what I meant by the words, the war has lost its meaning.
However, Gubarev immediately adds a caveat. From a business perspective, Putin's operation continues to bring the right people millions and even billions of dollars.
The rifle gives birth to power. The main point that needs to be understood. The rifle gives birth to power.
But Gubarev himself is supposedly not involved in such things, according to him.
I didn't take a single kopeck from anyone. I didn't kill anyone. I didn't torture anyone. My conscience is clear, and that's probably why I'm alive.
And here the collaborator is being blatantly dishonest because just a few minutes later, he himself admits to how he was involved in racketeering and seizing businesses in Donetsk.
And I, by the way, also took a piece of... Well, I didn't take it. I protected the businessman who did. An old friend of mine, Andrei Dundukov, came to me and said, we need to occupy it. I said, go ahead and occupy it. But what if this happens? I said, I'll provide protection. Well, while there was still some fire left in me. And for a long time there, as much as I could, I provided protection.
And there are many such contradictions in Gubarev's interview. For example, he emphasized many times that he is fighting fascists at the front. However, he himself turned out to be a hardcore Nazi saluter.
Yeah, I need to look for it. There's a photo. I'd even show it to you. Of course, I did the salute. If I find the photo, I'll give it to you.
And Gubarev doesn't even see any problem with this. On the contrary, he revels in himself, telling how he raised his hand from the heart to the sun.
There's nothing scary about it, it's nonsense.
Look, in my I understand.
Hitler? Hitler in the past is a scoundrel who killed 20 million of my fellow tribesmen, my ancestors. Therefore, Hitler is an absolute monster. And the salute is just a salute. It's all...
Why such frankness, you might ask? Especially from a person so afraid of going to jail for his words. And it's all very simple. As it turned out, Gubarev received a direct order from above to bash the bunker man, albeit carefully.
So I'm moonlighting for Putin's government. You could say that, yes. Well, without getting emotionally involved.
And apparently, Gubarev really likes the new order. Because Putin has fed up even him.
What's happening is impossible without contradictions. Well, and an evil Putin on the throne there, a fascist who is a super tyrant there. That's the most disgusting explanation of all. I was sometimes in this denial without saying it publicly.
But one shouldn't feel too much sympathy for Gubarev. He was and remains an unprincipled collaborator. He just defected to the side of those who pay more.
Which of us is a half-wit? Well, history will judge soon.
We can only hope that in the end, the very history that Gubarev relies on will ultimately deal with him for everything that has been said and done, and that this will happen much faster than he would ever wish.
The fact that our cities are destroyed is not our fault, it is our punishment.
That's all for now, and watch more other fiery news from the front in the next episode.